Today, we are in Salt Lake City, Utah, a place where faith runs deep, families are picture perfect, and everyone knows their neighbor. But in July 2004, one of those perfect families was hiding something absolutely horrifying. A young pregnant woman was about to discover that the man sleeping beside her every night had built their entire life together on lies, and when she finally found out the truth, it would cost her everything. This is the story of Lori Hackin. Hi, sweet ones. My name is Grandma Kitty, and before we dive in, take a second to subscribe if cases like this intrigue you. It helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from. That's how we find our neighbors here in our little true crime corner. Let me introduce you to Lori K. Suarez Hackin. She was born on December 31st, 1976. Lori was adopted as a tiny infant by Thelma and Geraldo Suarez, and she was welcomed into this really loving, faith-oriented home. The Suarez family had connections to both California and Brazil, which made things interesting. Geraldo, who was originally from this place called Paraíba in Brazil, worked as a Spanish and Portuguese teacher at Sunny Hills High School in Fullerton, California. He had actually met Thelma years and years earlier when they were both serving as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rio de Janeiro. Their shared faith was a huge part of their relationship and remained super central to their lives together. Thelma and Geraldo Suarez ended up having 2 children total. Lori's early childhood years were spent in sunny California, just living that West Coast life. But her life changed dramatically and completely in 1987, when something major happened. Her parents got divorced. At the time this all went down, Lori was only 12 years old and her brother was already 20. So here's what came out during the divorce. Their father had been having an affair with a mistress who was 30 years younger than him. 30 years. And to make matters even more complicated, this woman was pregnant with his child. After more than 2 decades of marriage, over 20 years together, the Suarez's relationship just came crashing to an end. The year after the divorce, Thelma and Lori packed up their lives and moved to Orem, Utah. This is where Lori would spend her teenage years and adolescence, surrounded by this really close-knit community with strong religious values everywhere you looked. And through all of it, she had the unwavering love and support of her mother. It was an incredibly difficult and painful time for young Lori. Her entire life, as she knew it, had been completely uprooted and turned upside down. Everything she knew was gone. But here's the thing about Lori. She adapted to her new surroundings surprisingly quickly. People who knew her during this time widely described her as intelligent and super capable. She absolutely crushed it at school, getting great grades and excelling in her classes. And she wasn't just a good student. She was also really popular among her peers and had lots of friends. Despite living in a pretty conservative area where everyone knew everyone's business, Lori was actually given a fair amount of freedom by her mom. For her 16th birthday, which is a big deal for any teenager, her father bought her a car so she could get to school more easily and have some independence. Lori spent tons of time hanging out with her friends, doing normal teenager stuff, but she also had this really strong sense of financial responsibility that a lot of kids her age didn't have. She understood the value of hard work and earning money from a super early age. As a teenager, she actually took a job at a car wash to earn her own money instead of just asking her parents for everything. She wanted to be independent and self-sufficient. Still, even with all her friends and her success at school, Lori sometimes felt like she didn't quite fit in perfectly with all the other young people around her. Think about it. Many of the local families in Orem were these traditional Mormon households with several children running around, the whole big family vibe. Meanwhile, Lori lived with just her divorced mother in a smaller household. It wasn't bad, but it was different. And when you're a teenager, being different can feel really isolating sometimes, even when you're doing well in other areas of your life. When Lori was around 15 or 16 years old, she met the person who would become the great love of her life, a guy named Mark Hacking. Mark was born on April 24th, 1976, which made him the exact same age as Lori. The two of them met in high school, and apparently sparks absolutely flew during a school camping trip. You know, one of those outdoor adventure situations where everyone's sitting around a campfire and suddenly romance happens. The Hacking family was really well liked and respected throughout the entire community. Mark's father, Douglas, was a pediatrician, an actual doctor, and the family was pretty financially well off, like they had money. The Hackings had 7 children total, which is a lot of kids, and they were seen as these model Mormons that everyone looked up to. Douglas worked incredibly hard to provide for his big family while his wife, Janet, took care of the home and all those children. Both parents were deeply committed to the upbringing and development of every single one of their kids. In short, Mark came from what everyone considered a really good, stable family. At school, Mark was known for being super charismatic and genuinely funny. He was popular and liked by tons of people. While Lori wasn't exactly sure yet what path she wanted to take in life or what career she wanted, Mark already had his entire future mapped out in his mind. He wanted to follow directly in his father's footsteps and become a doctor just like him. His brothers also had similar ambitions and goals. Mark definitely felt the pressure to live up to his father's accomplishments and his brother's success, and he talked about it pretty often with people. Some people describe Mark as charmingly clumsy in an endearing way, while others saw him as kind of an attention seeker who always tried to be at the center of everything happening around him. Lori and Mark didn't immediately become a couple right away when they first met. They were just friends for a while, hanging out in the same group. And even when they eventually began dating, it wasn't super serious at first, just casual teenage romance stuff. At the age of 19, Mark made the decision to take part in a Mormon mission, which is a pretty big deal in that faith. Together with a friend, he was sent all the way to Canada, where the main goal was to preach their faith to others, help people in need, and attend church group meetings regularly. But being so far away from home gave Mark this unexpected sense of freedom that he hadn't experienced before. Although he stayed in touch with Lori through letters and phone calls, and they were officially still together as a couple, he started seeing other women behind her back. He even spent the night at one woman's house, which is a huge no-no. In Mormonism, premarital chastity and staying pure before marriage is taken extremely seriously, like this is one of the most important rules. But it seemed like Mark had completely forgotten about that important principle during his mission trip. Unfortunately for him, someone found out about his behavior and reported it to the church authorities. Mark was sent home in total disgrace and humiliation. Back in Utah, tons of questions from friends and family members followed. Everyone wanted to know what happened and why he came back early. Mark quickly made up a story to cover his tracks and hide what he had really done. And soon after that, he rekindled his relationship with Lori, but this time things were way more serious between them. By that point, Lori was studying at Weber State University after receiving a scholarship, which was amazing for her. She was pursuing a degree related to business and politics, subjects she was really passionate about. And she was known throughout campus for being highly ambitious and driven. Lori didn't live that typical party-heavy student life that you see in movies. She actively avoided parties and wild social events, choosing instead to focus almost entirely on her studies and grades. She did, however, spend lots of quality time with her female friends and roommates. One of her dorm mates who lived with her later said that Lori had a really strong personality and knew what she wanted. Though she was absolutely doing well at university and getting good grades, Lori missed home and her family terribly. From the very beginning, she had actually wanted to attend the University of Utah, but she had been awarded a scholarship to Weber instead. And here's the thing. Higher education in the United States is notoriously and ridiculously expensive, and for many students and families, getting a scholarship is literally the only way to make college financially feasible without drowning in debt. Lori spent an entire year at Weber, dedicating herself completely to her studies with the specific goal of eventually transferring to the University of Utah. And guess what? She succeeded. She made it happen through sheer hard work and determination. After she made the move to her dream school, her relationship with Mark became so much more serious and committed. He also began attending the University of Utah at the same time, which meant they could see each other way more often. The couple seemed absolutely perfect for one another in every way. Mark enrolled in a pre-medical program to start his journey toward becoming a doctor. And Lori was such an incredibly dedicated and hardworking student that in 1997 to 1998, she actually received the University President's Award for Academic Achievement. That's a huge honor that very few students get. Mark would visit her on campus literally every single day so they could have lunch together and spend time as a couple. Her friends who watched them interact recalled that the two got along extremely well and seemed genuinely happy together. Mark went completely out of his way to be a loving and attentive partner. He constantly brought her flowers just because, paid her sweet compliments all the time, and treated her like a queen. Everyone who knew them was absolutely certain that Lori and Mark would one day get married and start a beautiful family together. It just seemed inevitable. Soon enough, Lori and Mark's relationship was about to move to the next exciting stage. Mark got down on one knee and proposed, and the couple immediately began planning their wedding. Both of their families seemed absolutely thrilled with their children's choices of partners. Lori's father, who had been pretty absent after the divorce, even said that he liked his future son-in-law 110%. That's a lot of approval. The wedding took place on the 7th of August, 1999, shortly after Lori had successfully completed her university degree and graduated. Not long afterward, she found herself a good job working at a bank in a professional position. Mark, meanwhile, finished his pre-medical studies at the University of Utah and was ready for the next step. The couple definitely wanted to start a family and have kids together, but first, they were really focused on securing proper financial stability. They wanted to be responsible about it. While Lori pretty quickly secured a good, stable job with decent pay, her husband really struggled to find work that matched what he was looking for. Hospitals in the area didn't have roles available that matched his expectations or qualifications, and the couple faced some serious financial difficulties during those early years of marriage. Money was tight, and they had to be really careful with their spending. Eventually, after searching for a while, Mark finally found a job at a hospital where he worked as a medical assistant on the pediatric ward with sick children. His colleagues and co-workers recalled that he was absolutely excellent with children. He was funny and engaging and had this calming presence that made kids feel safe and comfortable on the ward. He was genuinely well-liked by everyone who worked with him. Despite having a decent job that he enjoyed, Mark still dreamed constantly of becoming a fully qualified doctor, just like his father and his brothers had. But here's the problem. Medical school required both significant time and a whole lot of money. Two things the couple didn't exactly have much of at that point in their lives. They moved to Salt Lake City hoping for better opportunities, but even there, the cost of living was still a real challenge for them. Although they were both working full-time jobs, their combined salaries just weren't high enough for Mark to afford further expensive medical education. Still, their friends consistently described them as a really united couple with the same exact vision for their future together. They quickly became active members of the Mormon community in their new city and made lots of new friends through church activities. By 2003, the Hackings were seriously thinking about having a baby and starting their family. Lori continued working at the bank, and thankfully her salary was sufficient and stable enough to support the household and pay all their bills. Mark, meanwhile, found a new job working in a different hospital as a psychiatric aide, helping patients with mental health issues. While he often casually introduced himself to other people as a therapist, which sounds more impressive, in truth, he wasn't actually qualified to be one. His real role was more of a care assistant position, where he helped to support patients with daily tasks rather than providing actual therapy or counseling. Still, Mark absolutely hadn't given up on his ultimate dream of becoming a real doctor someday. He continued saving whatever money he could and actively searched for a medical school that would realistically allow him to somehow balance intensive study with work responsibilities and family life all at the same time. Eventually, after lots of research, he set his sights on the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which had a respected medical program. Lori, being the ever-supportive and devoted wife that she was fully behind him 100%. She told him directly that if he were accepted into the program, she would be completely happy to move with him all the way across the country to North Carolina for the entire duration of his studies, however many years that took. Lori was truly a devoted wife who often praised her husband in front of other people, telling everyone how helpful he was around the house and bragging about his cooking skills. In 2004, Mark finally applied to the University of North Carolina's medical school program and soon received a response in the mail, and it was positive news. He had been accepted into medical school. Lori was absolutely immensely proud of him and his achievement. The couple immediately informed their families about the upcoming big move across the country. Finally, after all these years of waiting and working and saving, it seemed like Mark was actually going to follow in the footsteps of his father and brothers and become a proper doctor. Their families were completely thrilled for them and supported them wholeheartedly in this new adventure. In July 2004, the couple handed in their official notices at both of their jobs and terminated the lease on their apartment. It was an incredibly stressful and chaotic time for both of them. With only 1 month left until the big move to North Carolina, they had practically no savings in the bank and no clear, solid plan for where they would actually live once they arrived in a completely new state. And then their lives took yet another dramatic and unexpected turn. Lori discovered that she was pregnant with their first child. It was the moment she had been dreaming about for years. Lori had always wanted a large, loving family full of children, just like the family she had grown up around. But the timing honestly wasn't ideal at all. Still, the couple truly believed that somehow things would work themselves out. They had faith. As it happened, fortune seemed to suddenly be on their side for once. One day, Mark came home absolutely beaming with excitement and good news. He told Lori that he had somehow managed to secure student financial aid through the university, and this meant he would now be eligible to rent subsidized university accommodation on campus. Rent living on campus would be far cheaper than trying to rent an apartment in the expensive city, and for the first time in quite a while, things were actually beginning to fall into place for them. By the summer of 2004, the Hackings were genuinely about to begin a completely new chapter in their lives. Mark was finally on his way to becoming a doctor like he had always dreamed, and Lori was going to become a mother. Their biggest dreams were finally starting to come true after years of struggle. Friends and family members who saw them during this time noted how incredibly excited Lori was about everything, talking constantly about the baby and the move. But they also observed that Mark had become unusually withdrawn and quiet, which was quite out of character for someone who was normally so outgoing and social. Then again, they reasoned, the couple was going through absolutely massive life changes all at once, and different people react to stress in different ways. Some people get more talkative, others shut down. Sadly and shockingly, on the morning of the 19th of July, 2004, everything changed in the worst way possible. At exactly 10:49 in the morning, Mark Hacking made an emergency 911 call to report that his wife was missing. He told the dispatcher on the phone that earlier that same morning, at around 6 o'clock, Lori had gone out for a jog before work, something she did regularly as part of her routine to stay healthy. But that particular day, she didn't come back home when she was supposed to. What's more concerning, she never showed up at work either, which was extremely unusual for her. Although Lori was technically on notice and due to leave her bank job really soon because of the move, she was still officially employed there, and she was well known among all her coworkers for her punctuality and strong sense of responsibility. She would absolutely never simply fail to show up for a shift without calling someone or informing her manager first. That just wasn't like her at all. Mark explained to the emergency dispatcher that he had immediately gone out looking for her as soon as he realized she was late returning home from her jog. He got in his car and drove around to all the places where she normally ran her usual routes, but there was no sign of her anywhere. He admitted that he probably may not have reported her missing quite so quickly, since it had only been a few hours, except for one major factor. She was pregnant with their baby. Mark said he was genuinely and deeply concerned about her well-being. What if she had suddenly fainted from pregnancy complications, or fallen and hurt herself badly, or desperately needed urgent medical help? Even though very little time had actually passed since she left the house, the police took his report extremely seriously right away. It was definitely possible that Lori had suffered some kind of medical emergency related to her pregnancy. Search teams were immediately dispatched and sent out to all the areas where she was known to regularly run and exercise. Investigators quickly divided up their efforts into different groups to cover more ground. One team searched through parks and trails and stopped random bystanders to ask if they had seen a woman matching Lori's description that morning. Meanwhile, another team focused their attention specifically on the husband, Mark. This was completely standard procedure in basically all missing persons cases. Though from the outside looking in, the Hacking's marriage appeared happy and solid with no obvious problems, investigators always have to consider all possibilities. Throughout that entire day, Mark repeatedly and emotionally blamed himself for not joining Lori on her morning jog. He kept saying over and over that she had specifically invited him to run with her that morning, something they sometimes did together as a couple to spend time together. But he had declined her invitation because he said he had already planned to go cycling later that evening instead. According to Mark, Lori had absolutely no issue with his decision and went running on her own without any complaints or arguments. At one of the parks where Lori frequently jogged along the trails, police officers discovered her parked car sitting in the parking lot. It was parked among a bunch of other vehicles, so at first it didn't stand out. But when they examined it more closely, something about it seemed really odd and off. The car was completely unlocked. and the keys were missing entirely. Now, this could potentially mean that Lori had simply taken the keys with her on her jog for safety and had just forgotten to lock the car up. Or perhaps she never bothered locking her car at all, which some people don't. There were no personal belongings left inside the vehicle, like a purse or phone, which in itself wasn't necessarily alarming since she probably took those with her. But there was one particular detail that really raised eyebrows among the investigating officers. The driver's seat was pushed all the way back as far as it could possibly go, and here's why that mattered. Lori was a pretty petite woman, fairly short in height. The seat was pushed so far back that she physically wouldn't have been able to reach the pedals to drive the car safely. Then again, some people do randomly adjust their seats when getting in or out of the car simply for comfort or to stretch their legs. Still, that one single detail would later become much more significant and suspicious than anyone initially realized. Investigators began systematically questioning people who were in the park that morning, hoping someone had seen something useful. And one woman actually came forward and claimed to have seen someone who resembled Lori jogging on the trails. It seemed like a really promising lead that could break the case wide open. Unfortunately, after following up on it thoroughly, it turned out to be completely false. The woman had been mistaken. Despite many hours of intensive searching all throughout the area, absolutely no trace of Lori was found anywhere in the park or surrounding areas. That very same day, a special dedicated search team was officially formed with the specific mission to locate the missing woman. The entire massive park had to be systematically combed through section by section. The case very quickly drew significant media attention from local and national news outlets. A visibly worried and distressed Mark appeared at a press conference that was organized, thanking the public emotionally for all their support and desperately pleading for any information at all regarding his wife's whereabouts. He looked like a man falling apart. Efforts to find Lori continued nonstop around the clock, and more witnesses were questioned about what they might have seen. As often happens in these types of cases, the husband automatically became a person of interest pretty early on in the investigation. Although investigators were definitely still exploring absolutely all possible scenarios and theories, they couldn't completely rule out the chance that Lori had been intentionally harmed by someone else, possibly even someone close to her. Two main theories quickly emerged among investigators. The first theory was that Lori had innocently gone for her regular morning run and had randomly crossed paths with someone with malicious and dangerous intentions, like a random attacker or predator. The second theory was that her husband Mark had something directly to do with her sudden disappearance. Both scenarios seemed entirely plausible based on the evidence. Parks in the United States can be absolutely vast and sprawling, with plenty of isolated spots and opportunities to get lost in the wilderness or to hide a body where it might never be found. No witnesses to any kind of abduction or struggle were found despite extensive interviews. But investigators did learn something concerning. 3 other people had mysteriously gone missing in that general area in recent months, which was unusual. The situation was growing more and more concerning with each passing hour, and police felt they had to thoroughly examine every single possibility, no matter how unlikely it seemed. Meanwhile, the couple's friends and family members who were interviewed all described Lori and Mark as the absolute perfect pair, soulmates who were meant to be together. Mark appeared genuinely distraught and devastated, and he was fully engaged in all the search efforts, joining volunteers to look for his wife. Another theory eventually began to circulate among some investigators and community members. Perhaps Lori had deliberately chosen to walk away from her husband, from her entire family, and from the strict Mormon community that had defined her whole life. Maybe she wanted a fresh start somewhere else. But that particular idea, honestly, didn't hold much weight or make logical sense when you looked at the facts. None of her belongings had been taken from their home. Her clothes were all still there, her toiletries, everything. And her loved ones were absolutely adamant and insisted that she completely adored Mark and had been genuinely thrilled and excited about both the baby and their upcoming move to North Carolina. All of her recent conversations with friends and family had been entirely about the new exciting chapter ahead of them. There was zero indication whatsoever that she had secretly met someone else or had been planning to disappear and start a new life somewhere. Police made the decision to thoroughly search the couple's apartment to look for any clues. Mark let them inside without any hesitation whatsoever and cooperated by answering all of their questions. But here's what caught their attention immediately. The apartment was absolutely spotless, almost too spotless, in a way that seemed suspicious, like unnaturally clean. The bathroom in particular smelled incredibly strongly of cleaning products, as if someone had just spent hours scrubbing every single surface. Investigators also found packaging and receipts for a brand new mattress and fresh bedding sets. Naturally, they asked Mark to explain why he had recently bought these items. He had an answer ready. He explained calmly that Lori had recently stained their mattress pretty badly due to getting her period, so he had simply replaced it with a new one. Now, it was definitely a strange detail to bring up considering Lori was pregnant, but it wasn't technically impossible. Some women actually do experience unexpected bleeding during early pregnancy, so it could have been legitimate. Still, the explanation immediately raised major red flags for the detectives investigating the case. Detectives decided to dig way deeper into Mark's entire story and timeline. They carefully checked his phone records and went through all his bank statements line by line. And here's what they discovered that made everything seem even more suspicious. It turned out that at exactly 10:23 in the morning on the 19th of July, the exact same morning that Lori mysteriously vanished, Mark had been at a store purchasing a brand new mattress. This timing seemed extremely suspicious and didn't match his story at all. He had specifically claimed that he began frantically looking for Lori as soon as she failed to return home from her jog. Yet somehow, just 25 minutes before calling 911 to report her missing, he was casually shopping for bedding like nothing was wrong. And here's another weird thing. He had made absolutely no mention of the shopping trip in his initial statement to police, like he just conveniently left that part out. The interviewer asked him, "I got up at 8, did some things. I played my Nintendo for a bit and we needed a new mattress. We had decided to get one, so I went because we had been shopping around looking at different stores and I had found one I wanted." The interviewer then asked, "What time was that when you went?" Mark responded, "I left my place at about 9 in the morning. Drove around to different places. Most of the stores where I was looking were closed when I got there, but one place had a sign on the door that said they would open at 10 o'clock, so I waited. I got there early." The interviewer pressed further. "What place was that exactly?" Mark replied, "No, I can't remember the specific name of the store, but it's located right next to this big furniture store called R.C. Willey." However, police found their investigation suddenly interrupted by a bizarre incident. On the 20th of July, just one day after Lori went missing, Mark was hospitalized after being found by shocked witnesses running completely naked down the middle of a public street wearing only flip-flops on his feet. Nothing else. A very concerned citizen had immediately called emergency services, and Mark was quickly taken to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. He claimed to doctors and police that he was going through a complete emotional breakdown because of Lori's sudden disappearance, and he simply couldn't cope with the stress and anxiety. He said he was losing his mind with worry. But the authorities investigating the case weren't convinced by this performance at all. It seemed pretty obvious to them that Mark might be deliberately trying to deflect attention away from himself and create an excuse for his behavior. The very next day after his hospitalization, a close friend of Lori's came forward to police with some absolutely critical information that would change everything. She told investigators that on July 15th, just 4 days before Lori went missing, Lori had received and taken a phone call at her work from someone claiming to be from the University of North Carolina. Lori had apparently contacted the university herself to ask some specific questions about a student loan and financial aid. It wasn't entirely clear what exactly was said during that particular conversation, but whatever it was had a huge impact. Afterward, according to her friend, Lori had visible tears in her eyes and had abruptly left work in the middle of her shift without explaining why. Her friend strongly suspected, based on Lori's reaction, that Mark had never actually been accepted into medical school at all and had been lying to Lori this entire time. Investigators decided they absolutely needed to look into this lead immediately. What they discovered when they started digging was absolutely shocking and changed the entire case. Not only had Mark not been accepted into the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill Medical School, he had never even bothered to apply in the first place. But it gets so much worse. He had never actually completed his undergraduate degree at the University of Utah either. In fact, he hadn't finished earning any college degree at all anywhere, which made it completely impossible for him to even apply to medical school in the first place. You need an undergraduate degree just to apply. The revelations absolutely stunned everyone who knew them. Mark had confidently told his wife, his entire family, and all their friends that he had successfully graduated from college back in 1999, the exact same year as Lori graduated. He never received an actual diploma to show anyone, but somehow no one found that particularly odd or suspicious at the time. He had claimed with a straight face that he was too sick and ill to attend the graduation ceremony in person and would simply collect his diploma later when he felt better, and everyone just believed him without question. He had even made a habit of regularly visiting Lori on campus, carrying a backpack that was completely full of heavy textbooks, pretending to be studying for his classes. He looked like any other serious student. Her mother later recalled specific memories of how he would frequently complain about how difficult his physics exams were and would even read his essays out loud so she could help him correct the grammar and punctuation. It was all completely fake. If Mark had never actually been accepted into medical school anywhere, then why on earth were they planning this huge move all the way across the country to North Carolina? And where exactly were they supposedly going to live when they got there, considering it definitely wouldn't have been in campus housing since he wasn't a student? It appeared increasingly clear that Lori had discovered the truth about everything just 4 days before she went missing. The situation was growing more and more serious with each new piece of information, and communication with Mark remained extremely difficult because of his supposed mental breakdown. Investigators made the decision to conduct another, even more thorough search of the couple's apartment, looking for anything they might have missed. Numerous items were carefully collected and bagged as evidence, but none of the specific details were disclosed to the public immediately to protect the investigation. Red stains that were strongly believed to be human blood were found in multiple locations. Splatter patterns were clearly present on the walls in the Hackin bedroom, suggesting some kind of violent struggle or injury. And in a bedside drawer next to the bed, officers discovered a hunting knife that had Lori's DNA on the blade. That discovery could very well explain exactly why her husband had been so extremely keen and urgent about replacing the mattress so quickly. The quantity of blood found at the scene suggested a significant injury had occurred, but not necessarily one that would be immediately fatal, and there was still frustratingly no body found anywhere. Nevertheless, officers genuinely feared at this point that Lori was no longer alive and had been killed. They also found Lori's car keys inside the apartment, which strongly pointed to the fact that this was a completely staged disappearance. It was now crystal clear to investigators that Mark had personally driven Lori's car to the park himself, parked it there to make it look like she had gone jogging, and then returned home with the keys in his pocket, completely fabricating the entire story about watching her leave. The day after his dramatic hospitalization, Mark's father, Douglas, spoke publicly in his son's defense at a press conference, claiming confidently that his son absolutely hadn't harmed Lori in any way and had only lied about university and his education because of immense pressure from the family to succeed. But the detectives working the case weren't swayed or convinced by this explanation at all. They strongly suspected that Mark was deliberately pretending to be emotionally unstable and having a breakdown in a calculated attempt to lay the groundwork for a future legal defense based on mental illness. His decision to immediately hire an experienced criminal lawyer while still lying in the hospital bed suggested to them that he was actually thinking quite clearly and strategically about his situation, not acting like someone who had lost touch with reality. Police significantly expanded the search efforts to include nearby woods, all the local rubbish dumps and landfills, and abandoned areas around the city. They also decided to carefully reconstruct the timeline of the days leading up to Lori's disappearance to figure out what really happened. It turned out that on Sunday, the 18th of July, just one day before Lori vanished, the couple had visited some friends for a small casual gathering at their home. Everything had seemed completely normal to the other people there, though several friends later mentioned that Mark had been unusually quiet and withdrawn during the visit, which wasn't typical for him. That same evening, around 8 o'clock at night, they were spotted by multiple witnesses shopping together at a local grocery store, looking like a normal couple buying food. After that shopping trip, Lori completely vanished from sight. Nobody saw her again after that evening. The next morning, Mark purchased a brand new mattress at the store, and then, shortly after that, he called emergency services to report his wife missing. Then CCTV security footage suddenly surfaced from cameras near the hospital, showing a man who very clearly resembled Mark dragging what appeared to be a very heavy item wrapped up in a large black rubbish bag. The footage showed him disposing of this suspicious bag in a large bin located near the hospital where he worked on the psychiatric ward. After dumping whatever was in that bag, he then went shopping for a mattress at the furniture store and finally made the emergency call to report Lori missing. The timeline was becoming clearer. The next stage of the investigation focused intensely on searching local landfills where rubbish from that area would have been taken. And at one particular landfill site, absolutely crucial evidence was finally recovered that confirmed everyone's worst fears. Police found a heavily stained mattress that was believed to be the exact one that Mark had hastily discarded and replaced. But they also found something even more heartbreaking. They discovered a handwritten letter from Lori, written in her own handwriting. In this letter, she told her husband directly that she was completely tired of all his lies and deception and that she wanted a divorce. She couldn't take it anymore. In the strict Mormon community where they live, divorce is considered an absolute last resort, something you only do in the most extreme circumstances. Mark would have definitely known that cultural fact, and he would also have known with certainty that the complete truth about his massive deception and lies was about to come out and destroy his reputation. By this point in the investigation, both the couple's families had sadly begun to accept the horrible possibility that the truth might be absolutely horrific and that Lori was dead. One of Mark's brothers went to visit him in the psychiatric hospital and emotionally pleaded with him to just reveal where Lori's body was located so the family could have closure. The other brothers followed suit in the coming days, all begging him to tell the truth. Eventually, after all this pressure from his own family, Mark finally decided to confess to what he had done. He admitted to killing his wife with a rifle, shooting her to death. He claimed it hadn't been premeditated or planned out in advance, just a spontaneous moment of pure rage that he now deeply regretted. According to his confession, after committing the murder, he had carefully cleaned the entire apartment to remove evidence, placed Lori's body inside a large rubbish bag, and left it in a dumpster bin located behind his workplace at the hospital where nobody would immediately find it. On the 2nd of August 2004, Mark Hackin was officially arrested and charged with murder. For many weeks after his arrest, police desperately searched everywhere for Lori's body, but locating it in the massive landfill proved incredibly difficult and time-consuming. On the 1st of October 2004, several months after her disappearance, her remains were finally found. Well, what was left of them after all that time. Even after her body was found, Mark incredibly continued to deny his involvement and claimed he was innocent. At the preliminary court hearing on the 29th of October 2004, he stood up and pleaded not guilty to all charges. The case was scheduled to proceed to a full trial. Lori's heartbroken family begged him repeatedly to just admit the truth and spare them the additional suffering of a long trial. But Mark remained stubbornly defiant and refused. Eventually, on the 15th of April 2005, after months of legal proceedings, he suddenly changed his plea and finally admitted publicly to killing his wife. He pleaded guilty. Initially, he was sentenced to only 6 years in prison, a shockingly light decision that was based on the way the law was written at that particular time. However, in July 2005, the State Parole Board made a major announcement. They declared that they would absolutely not consider Mark Hackin for any kind of early release until at least the year 2035, which was 30 years away. It was basically their way to work around the frustrating limitations of the existing legal system that had given him such a short sentence. As a direct result of this controversial case and the public outrage, something called Lori's Law was officially introduced and passed. This new law increased the minimum mandatory sentence for first-degree murder to 15 years before anyone could even be considered for parole eligibility. Under this law, Mark Hackin will be forced to spend at least 30 years in prison for the brutal murder of his wife before the State Parole Board will even consider scheduling a possible release date hearing. Mark Hackin's family eventually released an official statement to the public, which was read aloud by Douglas Hackin, Mark Hackin's father, at a press conference held in Salt Lake City. Here's what the statement said. It is incredibly difficult to talk about our son Mark Hackin without sounding like we are making excuses for his direct involvement in the completely senseless and tragic death of our beloved daughter-in-law Lori on the night of July 18th, 2004. We are doing this to clear up some major misconceptions about this case and to provide a much clearer understanding of what actually occurred and why it happened. As has already been widely reported by the media, in 1996, Mark was sent home early from an LDS mission for failing to live up to the extremely high standards expected from the missionaries called to represent the church. He was also experiencing some health problems at the time and returned home feeling ashamed and in serious spiritual, emotional, and physical pain. Within just a few weeks of returning, Mark suffered a series of additional unexpected health problems that resulted in him needing 3 separate surgeries. The most serious of these medical issues was a severe concussion, a seizure, and a broken back from accidentally falling off the roof of a house he was working on. Following many months of absolutely incapacitating back pain, Mark tried his best to go back to college classes, but found it almost impossible to sit in class for long periods due to the intense pain and the resulting inability to concentrate on anything. His physical ability to sit in chairs improved gradually over the years with treatment, but his ongoing inability to concentrate properly or learn and retain new information continued to seriously hinder him academically. Although we as his parents were completely unaware at the time that Mark had a learning disability, we have recently come to know and understand how truly agonizing it was for him to fail one class after another to the devastating point that he felt he could no longer attend college at all. These repeated academic failures were terribly hard on his already fragile self-esteem and created constant anxiety for him every single day. Rather than admit to himself and to others around him that he genuinely could not succeed in college, despite trying, he began to deliberately create the elaborate illusion that he was actually going to school and doing really well. He pretended convincingly to graduate from the University of Utah and carried his massive deception to the extreme point of actually physically visiting several different medical schools to do interviews and tours. We now know with certainty that he lied extensively about graduating from college and about applying to medical schools. Mark told absolutely everyone in his life that he had been accepted to 4 different medical schools and was carefully deliberating which one to attend. Last summer, Mark and Lori even traveled together all the way to North Carolina to look for a suitable place to live near the university and actually signed a rental agreement for an apartment. They then quit both of their jobs in Utah and packed up all their belongings to move across the country. Mark could sense that the massive house of cards he had been carefully building for years and years was finally beginning to sway and collapse, and he became even more anxious and desperate. Lori eventually found out the devastating truth that he had never applied to any medical schools anywhere, and Mark finally admitted absolutely everything to her on the night of July 18th, 2004. As you can probably imagine, Lori was deeply hurt and betrayed by all of this. To clear up some misconceptions about Mark's confession that had been reported, it was said by some media outlets that Mark's brothers, Lance and Scott, were the ones who directly told authorities that Mark had killed Lori. The reality and truth is that on July 24th, Lance confronted Mark with all the evidence that police had gathered and urgently pleaded with him to reveal where Lori's body was located. He and Scott met privately with Mark that same evening, at which time Mark finally confessed everything he had done to them in detail. His attorney was immediately notified and was instructed by Mark himself to provide information regarding Lori's exact whereabouts to the district attorney, an action which took place the very following day. From that point forward, it was never a question of whether Mark would eventually plead guilty, but simply when he would do it based on the slow processes of the legal system. Mark resolved and decided in August that he would absolutely never let his case be tried in front of a jury, and informed his attorney of that firm decision. As for Mark's character before all this happened, until this tragic chain of events, he had never been in any kind of trouble with the law, nor did he ever develop bad habits such as the use of illegal drugs or alcohol abuse. Mark always had good friends who cared about him. He has always been an obedient, hardworking, and thoughtful individual who treated us as his parents with respect and love. More than anything else, we know deep in our hearts that Mark truly loved Lori. We never once heard them argue or fight. We never heard him say a single negative word about her to anyone. When they were not working at their jobs, they were absolutely inseparable and always together. Mark suffers continually, every single day, for his terrible choices. Anyone who could have shared in our private conversations with him or read his letters and life history would know without question the genuine depth of his sorrow and remorse for having taken the life of the one person he cherished most in this world, and for having caused so much pain to so many others, especially Lori's family who loved her. Mark was particularly close to Thelma, Lori's mother, and has expressed particular concern for her suffering in almost every letter and conversation we have had with him since this happened. We are honestly not sure any of us will ever fully understand why Mark did what he did, nor are we sure he will ever fully understand it either himself. What we are absolutely sure about is that he is willing to pay any price for what he has done. He has a genuine desire to continue to serve others and help people, but realizes sadly that his opportunities to do so while in prison will be extremely limited. As a family, we hope that someday he can be released from prison so that he can be in a better position to contribute positively to the lives of others. As for when Mark should actually be released, we will leave that entirely up to the parole board as they consider how he conducts his life while incarcerated. And for the eternal consequences of his actions, we will leave that to the Savior, who will judge him with perfect justice, but also perfect mercy, having a full knowledge of the state of his mind at the time he ended Lori's life. Our family continues to feel deep and profound sorrow and regret for Thelma, Geraldo, Paul, and Lori's other family members and friends, for the devastating emptiness that has completely filled their lives since losing Lori in such a tragic way. As parents ourselves, we desperately wish we could have somehow prevented this absolutely tragic event from ever happening. We also loved her dearly and will continue to miss her warm presence in our lives as well. Although we absolutely abhor and are horrified by what Mark did to her, we are still proud of him for finally taking full responsibility for his terrible actions and for his genuine desire to repent for what he has done. As hard as it may seem to believe for people who don't know us, we actually love him more now than we did before all of this happened. We wish to express a final heartfelt thanks to our own family members, friends, neighbors, and community members that have extended unconditional Christ-like love and support to our family during this absolutely devastating and difficult time. Thank you also to Mr. Gilloth for his professional help and services in providing legal representation to Mark during this process. We are genuinely grateful that the media has mostly respected our wishes for privacy over the past year since this tragedy occurred. This will be our final official statement to the press as we respectfully request that we be permitted to move on with our lives and heal as a family. Finally, in the sincere hope that someone else out there might learn something valuable from Mark's terrible mistakes, permit us to quote Mark's own words directly. I know that prison is exactly where I need to be right now. I will spend my time there doing absolutely all I can to right the many wrongs I have done to so many people. Though I realize that complete atonement is impossible to achieve in this life, I have a lot of serious healing and changing to do within myself. But I hope that someday I can eventually become the man that Lori always thought I was and believed me to be. To the many people I have hurt through my actions, I am more sorry than you could ever possibly know or understand. Every single day my soul burns in absolute torment when I think about what you must be going through because of me. I desperately wish I could take away your pain and suffering. I wish I could take back all the lies I have told over the years and replace them with the truth. I wish I could somehow put Lori back into your loving arms. My pain is completely deserved. Yours is not deserved at all. From the very bottom of my heart, I beg for your forgiveness, though I know I may never receive it. There is no such thing as a harmless lie, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem at the time. You may think that a lie only hurts the liar, but this is so far from the truth. If you are currently traveling down a path of lies like I was, please stop right now and face the consequences. Whatever those consequences may be, they will be so much better than the pain you are causing yourself and others around you by continuing to lie. The family made the difficult decision to remove the name Hacking from Lori's headstone at her grave. We just felt that Mark obviously didn't want her anymore, said her mother Thelma with deep sadness. Lori's married name was replaced with the beautiful Portuguese word filhinha, which translates to little daughter in English. Lori Hacking's senseless death shattered not only her immediate family, but an entire community that had once looked at her marriage as picture perfect and ideal. Behind closed doors, she had been living with a man who had built his entire life on elaborate lies and deception. And when the truth finally began to unravel and come to light, she paid the ultimate price with her life. Her story is a tragic reminder that the most dangerous secrets are often kept by those we trust the most in our lives. Lori was just 27 years old when her life was violently cut short by the person who claimed to love her most. She was remembered by everyone who knew her as kind-hearted, intelligent, and full of hope and excitement for the future. A devoted daughter, a loving wife, and a soon-to-be mother who never got to meet her baby. Her bright light touched many people throughout her short life. Though her life was stolen far too soon, her memory lives on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her deeply. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Take care of yourselves and the people you love.